introduce yourself.
Oh yeah, so Will Lusenhoff, I'm a clinical assistant professor at UNH in the Department of Social Work. And the context for me making it out this way is we have a federal HRSA grant to do primary care behavioral health training for social workers and interprofessionally with our occupational therapy master's students as well. And we have an online program also, so we reach the whole state. So my one question is just, for me it's been fascinating going around to hear the 30 different models around how to try to integrate behavioral health and primary care, which is my more narrow focus. So I was just curious for your project, just like even drilling down a little bit, like where you're going to track a group of patients, where will they be, or maybe you're all still figuring that out, but I'm just curious about that piece.
So the question was about integrated behavioral health in primary care and some of the details of that. So we've been working on an integrated behavioral health in primary care for almost a decade now, before any of the district work. And so I think that with regard to that actual part of like the B1 integration, we've had a pretty good running start. And then with some of Sally's leadership just over the last year or so, I've been able to really dig into that much deeper and consolidate a much clearer model where we only focus on 4 conditions: depression, anxiety, alcohol, and substance use, primarily opiates, and where we've built in standardized screening and ways to track that screening and decision support tools for primary care doctors. And we have a registry where all the patients are tracked on a registry that are part of that program.
It's a collaborative care model.
It's the traditional collaborative care model with a bit of this blended substance use and mental health as part of the same entity. So we've been able to then take this work of where we're partnering with West Central and layer it on top of that existing work and haven't had to create that portion simultaneously. It's been evolving on its own.
Phil, you spoke very eloquently about the challenges of bringing multiple different teams together and the time that it took to just even build those relationships. You've done this in the past as well. Are there specific tools or approaches that all of us, as we're going to be engaged in that work, could use that will help accelerate building those relationships and creating a shared culture?
What comes to my mind at the top of my head is that in getting a team to work together to accomplish something new that they've never set out to do, right? The change agent, the lead driver of the change, has to spend a lot of time, with relationships in the change. You can't just give people a memo and say, please do it, right? You have to be there answering their questions. You have to kind of, I don't want to say hold their hand, but you have to keep encouraging them that they're moving in the right path in even baby steps, it seems to me, and that the more tougher the change, the more of that stuff you have to do. So I think you see in the process people coming together, and they all, it's, again, my experience, different tolerance for stress, different tolerance for ambiguity. Some people come into that, they want to know exactly what do you want me to do and give me the playbook and I will do it. And often with a new thing, you don't have that playbook, right? You're discovering it as you go along. And so it creates stress, it creates ambiguity. People don't know if they're doing the job right, and they have to be reassuring that we're taking baby steps together, but we're getting in the right direction. So there's a lot of cheerleading that has to go on to make these people feel that they're moving in the right direction so I would just give you an answer by saying it takes a lot of time from the manager of the change to invest in that process.
If I can add to that, Sally, a little bit, because obviously we're doing the same kinds of things. So just to add on what Phil was saying is, I think the communication has to be really clear. The shared mission, that even though you hit bumps along the way when you're trying to work with each other, but is it clear that the parties are involved and believe in the shared mission? Like, what is the purpose of us getting together? And if we all believe that, then we can pull the wagon in the same direction. So I think that has to be clearly defined in the beginning. The actual details of how that's going to happen have to flush out, and you have to be fluid and flexible. But the goal and the purpose has to stay there, and we have to remind ourselves of that sometimes. And as we meet, what are we really doing this for? It's not just because the 1115 waiver says pull up a B1 project. It's because there's a reason we're doing this, and it's all about patient care. And if we can keep that in the forefront of why we're working on this project together, that I think it does help the group to become more cohesive, even if you don't know the details and it's bumpy along the way.
And one of the things that we're learning at Valley is we have a lot of resources in the community and in the area, and anytime someone comes over to ask us if they'd like to partner with us, our answer is yes, please. So right now we're learning on building our charter, and I think as you spoke about understanding what the shared vision and mission is, so that we can all lean towards that right direction, and building the partnerships and the relationships. Someone said it was like a handshake, that these relationships have been going on for a while, but building a more solid relationship that's structured and more formal, I think is really helping us to connect the pieces with the relationships and the partnerships. That's what we're working on now.
Kristen Vance, I'm with Keene Serenity Center, and I have a question about the project that addresses perinatal addiction. I'm interested to know how you're incorporating peer recovery supports in that project. That's one of the services that we offer at Keene.
So we have a recovery coach who is now full-time. She started half-time, but then we've got another project to make her full-time. And she sits in the groups with them. I keep looking at Susie so she can tell me if I'm wrong. She participates in the groups with them. She's available for them to call. As I understand, they're calling 24/7, which we have to figure out that part of it. But she's really there as a resource. So clearly we need more than one person to support this population. But good to maybe connect and see how we can maybe add to that, as we have another project throughout the state for perinatal and OB practices coming down the way, not related to DISRIP, but still related to this population. So.
Can I just follow up on that? I don't exactly know where you're from, but when you say we have, is that Dartmouth?
Okay.
So this is sort of a question about sort of the approach. A lot of times, I'm at Cheshire Medical Center, so I'm part of the we. And a lot of times the we think that we need these services under both our control and our employment. And this, I think Kristen's coming from a perspective of she's an independent organization distinct from the health system who does this kind of work. So if we were trying to model ourselves and learn from your pilot, I would imagine we would start from the perspective that there's resources like peer recovery established in the community where the mothers in this case are going to transition back to the rest of their lives. And maybe we might choose this kind of component of a treatment experience to not be sort of build the team in the health center that has childcare and peer recovery and all that, because maybe the community already has some of these assets that we need to draw on. So I just wonder how many of the projects are, because they're team, 3 leads doing it, may tend to build something that's, not as holistic and community-wide as possible, because of 3 partners got to figure out how to solve this, right? Rather than maybe 300 partners really are going to figure it out. You just happen to be the leads on the starting the conversation.
So in our current recovery coach is a subcontractor with Dartmouth Hitchcock directly, but we're working with Dartmouth Hitchcock to make it a position of an employment so that they can get benefits, because we think that is really something that they should be eligible for. But the we partnerships around the state, again, going to a different project now, with a new grant that we just got, it's partnering with OB practices throughout the state and then using community resources either through direct employment of those community practices or other resources out there to contract with to get these kind of resources set up and implemented into those projects and teams. So it's really figuring out where you can get the people and then getting them involved, but it's hard to find the people too sometimes.
Hi, I just want to thank you for inviting myself along with Carol at Wellson's. I'm Juan Patterson from New Hampshire Helping Families, and I'm really interested in knowing the projects that you are doing, and it's important for us to understand how can we be a partner with you, and also for you to understand the services and the benefit structures that our members, your patients, have. And to know that we're not just an MCO that pays claims, but we really do have a strong structure of integrated care model where we have embedded care managers, care coordinators, medical directors, psychologists, pharmacists within our MCO that we really should leverage with you to help with these initiatives that you're doing. And I wanted to be able to share with you that New Hampshire Healthy Families, our medical director, Dr. Sandy DeCapua, will be presenting our integrated care program and the services we have at the IDN lead meeting that I welcome you to attend. If not, just learn about the services that we have. We do have the integrated care team that comes together, talks about your patients. We'd love to be able to partner with the providers in a shared care plan. We also have an SUD director that is really engaged in the pregnancy program. We have a Start Smart for Babies program and our member connection team that is really out there trying to really engage our members with you. So I want to be able to let you know that we're here as a partner, and please leverage us as much as possible. Thank you.
We would love to invite you to the improvement tables and to join the projects that are ongoing. I'm speaking on behalf of you guys. Thank you. Sorry. I should be very respectful. But we'd love to have you at the tables with us instead of just coming to an advisory council meeting, but to join some of the improvement teams as they are working. You all have so many resources, and we have been anxious to invite you to break bread with us and to share with us, and so that we can learn more about your resources. So I'm going to, Sue Ellen,
Yeah, one of the things that would be extremely helpful, we'd love to have you join, is help us with the continuum of care. We have gaps. We don't know where some of these patients end up. So right now we're working together as integrated care, but I don't know if the primary care is going to know if our folks ended up in an emergency room in Seacoast, for example, if they're visiting, or if the patients don't tell us these things, we don't know. And so one of the big gaps in this integrated care stuff is the whole continuum of services that our patients are receiving. We have no way of knowing that unless people voluntarily tell us. Yeah. And so that would be huge if we could work together to try to figure out how to fill in those gaps and really be able to intervene if we knew what that looked like.
Right. And we have technology to have the capability to stay connected like that, and we'd love to share that with you.
I would also just reiterate that for the MCOs that have separate carve-out vendors for behavioral health versus the general health, we need both parties at the table helping us do this kind of work. If we're really thinking about the person as a whole person, we get you have different business structures, but we really all need to be working together to get to Sue Ellen's point of the continuum of care.
Sort of reminded of that. Do we really have to reinvent the wheels time and time again? Part of the learning of this IDN is that we're all learning new things. And my question to you is, as you think about all the learnings that you're doing, how can we rapidly export that experience, those lessons learned, to the other partners in the room? So I'm going to make a very explicit ask. Would all of you be willing to host visits from other partners in our IDN to come to your sites, your team meetings, come walk in your moccasins for a couple of hours or a day so that they can actually look and feel and experience what you've learned, and then take those learnings back to their home organizations?
I think that's a great concept, because really seeing it, touching it, experiencing it really makes a difference. I did that when I was back with the Dartmouth system a few years ago, and we did field trips, and you really don't understand. You can look at a protocol on paper, but until you go and understand the culture and the way things are operational and meet the people, I don't think it really pulls it all together. So I think that's a wonderful idea. For Valley Regional, we would be very, very excited and happy to have anyone who'd like to join us, and we'll be reaching out also to learn from you. And one of the things I like what you spoke about is at the table where we have our partners and our work groups, it's an information sharing. So we partnered with Counseling Associates, which is Susan Borchardt's group, and she immediately sent us some links for some training for primary care to learn about embedded and integrated behavioral health, which we wouldn't have necessarily had the resources for. So this partnership is really growing, and at the table as we sit to have these discussions, there's no ranks, nobody's more important than the next person. It really is an open forum, and we have medical assistants, secretaries at our table, and everyone just pitches in with great ideas, and I think that's really what the core of this is information sharing, because we all are experts in our own ways, and putting all that expertise together in one room creates this beautiful project.
And I'd also echo embracing Stephanie and your team of the resources and the expertise they have. I mean, that was a struggle for our team of conforming's not the right word, but it's what comes to mind of following these structures to get things in place. And we kept saying to them, you need this structure in place for longevity. We need to have this documentation. We need to be this methodical. And there was resistance every week with kind of, making a process flow or, using a project plan. But we worked together to kind of put it in maybe a different version of it to make it to what they were looking for. But, the resources that your team has is very helpful, and they're flexible into figuring out how to make it work with your team.
Eileen?
So, great question, Sally, and it sort of caused me to think about, how do we take the opportunity from what you all are learning through getting your projects off the ground that can be replicated or duplicated, or also learn from? It reminded of what you said early on, Phil, which is when you think about bringing partners together to do something, you need to plan a whole lot more time into. It's not going to happen like that. So, whether there is an email that goes out that says anything that you've learned that you want to share with the group from your experience, any aha moments, not that we all need more reporting, but something that will allow you to trigger to think about, here's something to share. And I'm wondering, since we have a Region 1 website, is that a place where we can all send our tools? Hey, I created this document to do this thing, and it just goes there. And so when any one of us are thinking of, I'm thinking of doing a new form, does that become a place we go to see, has somebody else already created it? And then all I need to do is put a different header on it. I don't have to spend brain power trying to come up with a form if you guys have already done it.
Absolutely. Reading our mind for those of us that developed some prompt questions in case there weren't any. One of them was, what are your biggest aha moments? And I forget something else. Oh, yeah, what tools do you wish you had in hand when you started this journey that now you've developed but would have been helpful for groups that are starting off that they don't have to necessarily do the legwork? But thank you for the marketing of our website. If you have anything you'd like us to send, we are constantly evolving it. We have tools, we have resources, we have links, we will have this audio, we have any of our meetings that we record, video, anything. So we will work to make it as useful and impactful to everyone. So please, thank you for that, for marketing. And I will ask, if there were, take a moment, are there any tools for those of you who have started and are on your way that you wish you had in the beginning that you've been developing that might be helpful for the Valley Regional team that's just starting off, or Cheshire Medical Center? I'm speaking right now to the P1 too,
but I think we're finding lots of small important things as we go, and I think we've mentioned a couple in passing, but simple things like consent process and consent forms and consent entities, just kind of narrowing that down. How to identify a shared population, the process and the parameters for that, how to communicate with those patients, who's going to take that responsibility and trying to keep that patient centered. We're developing letters that go out to select community organizations. So how do those letters read? Who do they come from? Who signs them? How are they distributed? Then following that up with in-person engagement. So I think we're finding lots of these little things. Other ones that come to mind, just the shared care plan. And we have the platform, but we don't have a template yet really for how it works. And so we're having to do that with Michelle's work. And so we'll have something to share there. And how to organize these MDTs, who participates, where are they held, all of that. So I think we will have a nice list of very tangible things, and then we can share those and get feedback on how to improve our process. But very nuts and bolts stuff right now.
For some of for the community projects, you have similar thoughts?
Well, I'd be happy to endorse the work that CHI did for our project, which was a tool that came in and moved us along in a far more efficient and organized and helpful process than we would have done had we been stumbling on our own. So that extra resource was just a godsend, basically, because all the people involved in these things are already doing busy jobs, right? So where do you squeeze the time to do a doodle poll and see when people can come and plan the agenda and type this up and do all that sort of legwork that more than just a support staff could do, right? But she's sort of shaping it, helping us, right? That tool was invaluable. And so I would highly endorse the idea that sometimes outside resources are necessary to make these things happen.
I think we would echo.
No, I'm just going to say, I absolutely agree, Phil. Because, we look at integrated care because of the 1115 waiver, the B1 projects, but in reality, we've all been trying to do this for years and years and years. So there is a bucket of work sitting out there that's been done, that we're not really reinventing the wheel if we can go out and find the work that's been done previously. And CHI has done that. They've been doing this for a very long time and trying to work towards that end. So absolutely look at the resources that are out there that can smooth over some of those bumps, and don't think that you have to reinvent the wheel.
It's going to seem a little off base, but I hope it makes some sense. I alluded to this in one of the Concord meetings, which some of you would have been at, but as much as the managed care companies in the department have claims data that I'm sure you'd all love to have tomorrow, remember that it's delayed. Remember that it's when people have primary coverage, like Medicare or other primary coverage, and we're secondary, that we don't always get the claim. So the work that you do on the ground is so valuable to us, because one of the things we've identified more recently is, unless we get a claim that a woman is pregnant, and we don't often get that claim, whether she had a pregnancy test somewhere that was somebody didn't put in bill for, we're not getting those claims like we used to. We don't know that she's pregnant until sometimes after she delivers. And then it's too late, right? We haven't had our care management team intercept and be there to support or help with some substance use disorder issues. So we are struggling with, if we don't have that claim, we don't know she's pregnant, should we be looking at methadone stuff? Will that give us an indicator? Because clearly she's getting methadone somewhere. But just keep that in mind, that what we have isn't perfect either, and that as I listen to your individual plans, and there's a lot of plans obviously in the IDN, so for us to really get to know each of your plans, we almost have to have a face-to-face to figure out how we can best support you and what you might be doing that would support us in really making this the best it can be for any of the Medicaid members. I don't know how else we can do it without each other.
So, it's not necessarily a tool, but one thing that I would highly suggest for the IDN as you're going through these new projects going on is there are a lot of tools about the formation of groups. And to me, the easiest part of this is creating the forms, it's creating the binders, it's giving the information, because it's all just very black and white to help support the project. That initial forming of the groups is so important, and there's a recognition that groups, as you're forming community groups and community initiatives, they go through these ups and downs. That's where you get the storming and forming and all of that. But I think that if somewhere on that website, when you're talking about voting forms and all of that, if there was a really good synopsis, and I can't think of one off the top of my head, but that talks about the nature and the ebb and flow of groups, it will help. It helped me when I went through a large community initiative in Sullivan County many years ago. I read this and I went, oh my gosh, this isn't the group falling apart. This is a natural process of the group, and you have all these behaviors and all of these, everyone comes to the table with an agenda, and you're trying to navigate all of that and still move the initiative forward. And I think that if somewhere on there was a tool that talked about the initial formation of groups and some of the norms you're going to go through, and it's okay to have this behavior happen, and these are some ideas to navigate it, and it takes that, some of that, oh my God, what is going on, out of it. And as you get into the project, you're always going to hit these barriers within the relationships of the group. And I think that having some kind of, just a few narratives and tools, and I think stuff, I know Jeannie Ryer has got some of that group stuff, but just having that on there as a resource to help the navigation of those groups. And some of the things Phil talked about with the relationship building, it is so important. And to me, that the tools that you have to create really is more the easy part, because it's once the relationships are all created and bonded, it takes the pressure off of some of that creation. So.
Yeah, so I just want to add that team building and team relationships is definitely one of the biggest things we look at as facilitators, and something we talk about often. And so you have your basic team building to begin with, but then you layer on top of you're having primary care providers and behavioral health providers working together in different ways that they haven't before. And that's a whole new level of trying to come together and work together. There's language barriers and all that. So I would just say, be open with each other, and we as facilitators are trained in helping to bring that along, and be patient with the process, because it is rocky at first.
Do any of you have patients and or their families at your table? We've heard about the PATP experience, Chris, but are the other teams bringing patients and families to the table to be part of the improvement in the design of the models?
Right now, we've talked about it in a couple of different meetings, and I think actually Joanne Wagner right now is working to identify the appropriate Medicaid representative person to be there from the primary care practice. So it's not been something we've completely forgotten about, but it's not something that we've actually done yet. And I think we are a little bit worried that the system and the tools and the process are operating at a level quite above the patient experience. So I think a little bit of, and part of that is we have to design it that way to really meet the B1 and I think work out some of the kinks. So I think our very real intention is to bring that person in, but did feel that timing was maybe not quite right for that for our group. That may be a mistake in the end. So that's a hope for the future.
We have not brought that level of patient satisfaction or input into the process either at this stage of the game. And I think it's obviously a compelling presentation that we heard about how important that is. But like Matt, I would say that if we brought them in, my worry would be bringing them into sort of a mess. And people didn't even know what to say about what's this program going to accomplish, or what is it, what's the elevator speech. There was a lot of homework that needed to be done before we could confidently really listen. Really, I think it's a matter of timing about when to bring that in, but obviously too important to ignore.
And we've discussed it for our group as well, and where we've just had our first meetings. We're not quite ready, but that is on our agenda to really talk about that. We'll probably be reaching out to you for your expertise in helping us to onboard that. But I've been in committees elsewhere where there has been vital feedback given to us, because we all live the language, we all live the world of healthcare, and patients, understanding a patient's perspective of navigating. While we're all patients in our own way, we understand the system intimately, whereas other patients who are not in healthcare don't. And it was really vital having that person at the table with us to remind us that maybe the brochure we created that was beautiful wasn't quite geared towards someone who didn't know a lot about healthcare and things. So we had great feedback from our patient council.
Do you want to respond to the barrier of timing, or do you agree you're at thought? Yeah.
So it's probably the number one, maybe right after where we find them. But I encourage the idea, this concept of we have to have our house in order. I encourage you to think about when you're throwing a big party at your actual house and you have those friends who come in and help you get your house in order right before. Maybe you guys have clean houses, but mine is always needing a little attention. So patients and their families can come into a mess. Because if you have it all formulated, if you have your objectives and your mission and your tools and everything all set, then what exactly are they coming in to advise on? You know, I encourage you to bring them in from the beginning, be open and honest, transparent. This is a new project for us. This may feel chaotic, things may be over their heads, but then if you don't have that in the planning stages of it, you're missing it. To bring it in when everything's nice and neat, the need there is as essential. So I'm happy to talk with you about how to navigate that, even though you're feeling maybe like this is a little chaotic. I mean, the truth is, we all know what that's like, and probably the patient or family members that you would bring in also understand that things aren't always nice and neat.
If I could just add to that, bringing different cultures together to work together. I have consistently found having the patient and the family at the table from the beginning when it's ugly. They already know it's ugly. They're experiencing it every day when they come and touch us. But it really levels that culture, because when we start to have, I'm coming from my perspective and Sue Ellen, you're coming from your perspective, but we're not quite on the same page, to have that voice of the patient saying, wait a second, what I experience is a division between how I'm being treated at one place versus another. And I have found that is one of the most valuable tools to create that shared culture that is so important as we work together in these multi-sector partnerships. So I think we may be calling you, Tanya, for help in the future. Thank you.
I think we've all had the experience of coming into an initiative when everybody else has been working together and building all these connections and partnerships, and we come in and it's really hard to catch up and to ever feel like an insider. You're always kind of the outsider. So if we have a group of people that have, we've heard the struggles of working together to bring together all these different partners, they're just another partner, different, etc. But I mean, they're still going to function and should be expected to function under the similar rules of, social norms, etc. So you bring them in from the beginning. They're insiders, and there's not that feeling that they're always not on the same page or a few steps behind. So yeah, contact me.
So, real quick, so we have a patient representative on one of our committees, and I can't tell you how many times it's been very much an aha moment for us in that we're discussing something or talking about implementing something or so forth, and she said, we'll be like, well, I think this, and this is how I feel with this, and it's an opportunity for us who's been in this subject in this topic to step back and be like, wow, okay, we really need to listen. So I definitely think that it's very important to bring that in any type of work that you're doing.
Other questions? Mark, do you have any questions?
You guys hit on this before, but a lot of times the IDN, the administrative team of 4 of us, is wondering, do you need more? Do you need us to get out of the way? What's the right balance at the right time? I wonder if you could speak to that balance and how we can be helpful at the right time and how we can get out of your way when it's time for us to be out of your way.
I'm happy to speak. I get all the emails, so I'm happy to speak to that. It's incredibly useful because, you know, and again, to Phil's point, when we're talking about how busy people are all the time and how we're all caught up, that if I don't get the email from you all saying, did you sign the agreement that we need to have in place before we can do the shared decision, I don't know where that went. You know what I mean? But the constant sort of pushing the team along, it does feel supportive. It does not feel like nagging. And so I just want you to know that, although the response might be, all right, I'm getting to it. But the reality is, without it, it's so complex and there's so many moving parts that I think that, you know, our agency in particular, the people that are involved in this, would be it'd be a lot harder to keep track of all the things that we do need to be doing to make sure we keep this thing moving forward. So for us, we really appreciate that administrative support.
And I would echo that. I think the balance feels good. I mean, the accessibility is good, the responsiveness is good, the practical problem solving is very good, the organization is up to date. So it feels like a good balance right now, Mark.
And I'll
just start.
Go ahead.
And just starting out with our group, I've greatly appreciated the YooHoo emails and the reminders and the abundance of resources, because we're just beginning to navigate. And while we all believe in the project and the core and the foundations, really figuring out how do we get from point A to point B is really, and especially for us just launching this, has been a little bit of a challenge. So those resources are tremendous. I'm really excited to learn more about the shared care plan and how that can also contribute. But having Stephanie as our coach, the Citizens Health Initiative, when we reach out to her and say, you know, we've really not built a formal charter, how do we do that? And she whips one right out for us and says, here's the skeleton, let's start here. We'll put in your information. So I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure at some point you want to graduate us to a little more independence, but right now, I love the hand-holding. It's perfect.
And we had slightly a different experience at the beginning, but I think it's evolved. And our group, the women that work, it's all women, in the addiction program, they are so used to just doing it all themselves and figuring out how to get it done that initially I think they really felt like, oh, this is a bit intrusive, I'm gonna get it done, why do I have to do it your way? We know how to do this. And you know, we had several resets where we kind of had to reevaluate how we were getting Stephanie and her team integrated. And I think that we've gotten it to a really great point, but it was not easily accepted at the beginning for our group. But we got there. And Stephanie brought cookies periodically. I think that helps also. But you know, that was where we kind of would do a separate meeting without the group to kind of brainstorm and prepare so that when we went there, we could talk at a different level with it. You know, I mean, it took a little bit more to get going, but I think the patience and understanding that not every group is going to accept it the same way was very helpful. So
I think you bring up a good point too, that as the groups are getting going, it's you need to tailor this to what is going to work for your environments. And with our group, we've set it up so that the first Tuesday is the entire work group. The third Tuesday is Valley staff. So all of those issues and those processes and procedures and everything we can address internally and in that kind of private moment to really vomit whatever happens to be going on. And it continues to move things along so that on the first Tuesday when the entire work group is going to get together, we're focused on the big picture. So we're kind of constantly going from the minute up to the landscape as well.
I appreciate your question, Mark, and I would echo what the other panelists have said, that the presence of the admin people to guide us and help has been very useful and good. I will suggest that there is a point in which we might feel that that's beyond good but into meddling, and I'm not sure where to say that, but I think that's a potential risk out there, right? Because you know, when the rubber meets the road, people have to do the work together, right? And they need time for themselves. And I'm not sure what that is. I don't think we've got that point where we've ever felt the IDN events have been intrusive yet. But I imagine that that point would exist at some point.